Hello, everyone. We'll just wait for everyone to join, and then I will do the introduction. Okay. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to the fourth instalment of the SmileFast Webinar Series. Tonight, you're in for a treat. We're thrilled to be joined by the brilliant and highly respected Eddie Coyle, here to dive into the world of cutting-edge dental technology, the game-changing Overjet AI software, and how it can transform your practice. Eddie isn't just a dentist, he's a visionary healthcare leader with more than 30 years' experience spanning clinical quality, governance, and innovation across the UK and Europe. He's held pivotal roles, including Chief Medical Officer and Chairman of the Medical Board at the Colosseum Dental Group Europe, a Clinical Director at Bupa Dental Care, and a leadership role at Oasis Dental Care, all with a mission to raise the bar in patient care and operational excellence. Now, as a global consultant, Eddie is at the forefront of integrating technology into dental clinics, helping professionals like you harness AI to enhance diagnostics, streamline workflows, and ultimately elevate the patient experience. This session is interactive, so we encourage you to take part in live polls and drop your questions in the Q&A box. We'll have time for a short Q&A at the end. So sit back, get inspired, and discover how Overjet AI and the SmileFast partnership could be the next big leap forward in your day-to-day dentistry. So let's get started, and over to you, Eddie.
Thanks very much, Lou, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope everyone's had a great long weekend and also had a fantastic start to the week, although I'm sure when the alarms went this morning, it was a bit of a drain. Anyway, we've got a bit to get through this evening, and as Lou said, I look forward to some questions as we go through. Lou will jump in and interrupt me if it's necessary. I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey as to what it's all about, who are we as Overjet, and what are the differences that this can actually make in your practice. So without much further ado, let's get on. Lou's already done the very kind introduction. That's a little bit about me. The most important thing for tonight, I'm a clinician. And as a clinician, the most important thing we do is deliver care to our patients. And when we get that right, the world's usually a pretty happy place in every aspect. I joined Overjet earlier this year after a short period of consultancy at the end of last year. And now I'm heading up their clinical practice from an international standpoint. Good news, some CPD, always good, especially if you're taking time out on your Tuesday evening. So the learning outcomes are there, but the SmileFast team will fix that all out with the questionnaire that will be required after that. Okay, let's get cracking. At the risk of stating the obvious, AI has already arrived in all of our lives. I'm sure we're all using ChatGPT. You might be using it around the home. If you're a sports fan or betting on things, you're probably using it to analyze your favorite sport and your sporting figures. Netflix, even the movies that you watch, right down to that, we all think it's suggesting what we want. There's an AI algorithm behind the whole thing. So even when we try to have downtime, our AI is there. And of course, the scourge of the smartphone and everything that does, it's all there now. Gemini, it's just all over the place. And then you move into work, and hey ho, it's been around in practices as well. Everything from dental notes taking to try and make that journal a bit easier, implant planning, aligner planning, smile design planning, it's all there. So realistically, AI for some of the detection and diagnostics is probably slightly behind the curve if we're being really honest. So there's a lot going on already, there's a lot around us. Now, just before we get started, the term AI or artificial intelligence is not one I'm a big fan of. And certainly in the US, we're trying to move away from that and talk about assisted intelligence or augmented intelligence. I haven't met a clinician yet who would rather be artificially intelligent. So if we maybe just use that theme as how this is going to assist and augment your daily practice, and park that thought as we get started tonight. Who are Overjet? Okay, so we are the only dental AI company that is actually being approved. We've got FDA cleared approvals. FDA is the equivalent of the MDR. The big difference in the FDA is when you're going through FDA approvals, you have to have clinical trials going on as well. And that leads to a very, very great depth of approvals that actually mean the accuracy of our product is very high. But I'll come on to talk about that as we go through. This is here to support your treatment planning and help our patients to actually understand what's going on. One of the things that attracted me to Overjet was the level of expertise in the team. And that's everything from the product team to the engineers, the software guys, the machine learning guys. It's just incredible what's there. And then I think the most important thing, we're continuing to evolve the product all the way through. I'm one of about 15 dentists that are on the staff on a daily basis. That doesn't count all the people doing the annotations and everything. There are hundreds of those guys and girls spread across the world as well. So there's a very strong clinical element to Overjet, and I think that's really important when it comes down to using a tool which ultimately in front of your patients will swing how you diagnose and how you treat. We're the leader in the US. We've got over 100 DSO customers, 4,500 practices using it, and you can see the companies that we partner with in the US. For me, the biggest takeaway from this is the fact that over 100 million patient x-rays have gone through our system. That's a fairly large database. It's a fairly large sample size, and it's a great facility. That number only goes up day on day. Let's pause for a second. So how do those AI models get trained? Well, the good news is it's very similar to how the human brain develops as well. And we have what we call a deep learning model. And you have to be able to continually repeat things. As adults, adult learning involves continual repetition. And this just mimics how the brain goes about things. So dentists annotate that so that it gives it the right information. And then it learns as we go through so that the learning model then gets the point where it can take an x-ray it hasn't ever seen before, and it will actually spit out a detection suggestion similar to what a dentist would do. And I think that is really, really important as we go through to be able to point out not only the pathology, but also the normal anatomy. Let's not forget, many of us have spent years and years and years being trained, being very, very well educated and being very well guided by some eminent clinicians in our lives to be able to get these things right. We do it on a daily basis at the drop of a hat. We just take it for granted. On the other hand, I'm sure everyone today at some point had a conversation with a patient and tried to explain those multiple shades of grey. And I'm sure you're all fantastic at getting the patients to interact with you and be able to understand what's going on. The simple fact is, trust is probably a massive part of that. Full understanding? Well, let's wait and see. We train our algorithms, and so there are dozens of algorithms that actually look at things. If we just take a couple of examples. So there's an algorithm for the enamel-cemental junction. There's another one for the enamel. There's another one for picking up restorations. There's another one for bone. And actually, what actually happens is all of that data is then built together so that you can actually get to the situation where it recognizes a radiograph it's never seen before, and it actually pulls up some suggested detections on there. What you're seeing here, bone levels are calculated in green, amber, and red. Green up to 2 millimeters, amber between 2 and 3, and red beyond 3 millimeters. Obviously, this is just one part of it because there is a patient attached to this, which tends to be very 3D. You'll be able to see on this film as well, if you're close enough to your screen, the red areas, and this is where caries is showing up. The pulp comes up in purple, the enamel comes up very bright white, as you would expect. But really, you can see now how this is starting to show a much more informed picture when speaking with a patient. So what happens? We actually take data, unstructured dental data, photos, x-rays, everything. We put it through the machine learning, and it actually gives us those actionable insights. So things that we can transfer into information that make it easy to communicate and understand not only as a clinician, but also with our patients and with our teams. Now, many of you will be sitting there saying, well, that's great. I've been super trained. I've been doing this for years. Is it that accurate? Great question, and entirely relevant, to be fair. As I mentioned, when you go through the FDA clearance, then you have to have the clinical trial data. And you'll forgive the bright yellow, but I was trying to work out the best way. When you're not live with an audience, it's easier to make it super obvious. So we are able to, and FDA cleared, to detect caries. And you'll be able to see that realistically, when that was happening, dentists missed 40% less areas of decay when they were using the AI. So 100% of dentists in the trial detected more decay when they were using Overjet. Then you go onto the bone levels, and our bone levels are accurate down to 0.35 millimeters. I'm sure some of you have some fantastic eyesight, but not to that level. And realistically, this is now coming out at 99% as sensitive. Charting, so it's being able to highlight and outline whole tooth, wisdom teeth on OPGs, enamel, dentines, restorations, crowns, implants, root canals, and also display the tooth numbering as well, which has been adjusted from the US system. You'll all be delighted to learn. As we go on, we can also detect periapical radiolucencies. Again, we're all trained to spot it, but how accurately can we explain it, and how much is it able to be understood by the patient? But again, 100% of dentists in the study improved their detection. It's a pretty big number. We're also cleared to detect caries in children on x-rays down to the age of 4. Some of you may have heard me say, if you can get a bite wing or a periapical on a 3-year-old, then my utmost admiration and congratulations. It doesn't mean that our stuff isn't relevant for those people. It just means you need to proceed with caution. But again, 100% of the dentists who participated in this were more accurate. We also pick up calculus as well. And again, you can see 100% of the dentists taking part were more accurate with the AI. So it's a pretty convincing argument to be able to say it is accurate, it's improving detection, and therefore it's improving what we actually tell our patients. Now, a little bit of boredom. Sometimes it can be, I've been in lectures where people present papers after papers after papers. You'll be delighted to know I'm not going to do that this evening. I'm going to pick out a very, very few examples. There is a ton more. If anyone's super interested, please reach out to us. We can give you this. But I just thought it'd be useful to highlight a few. Now, this one study, please don't try and read all these words. I will try to summarize it as best as I can. In this study, we actually used AI for bone levels, and we gave it to dental students in their first year and also in their 4th year in one of the US universities. Simple statement of fact, both of the groups showed improved accuracy. So therefore, the continued training in the radiographic interpretation, the diagnostic accuracy improves. Regardless of the stage that you're at, it just gets better. So it's there as a support. Another one, being able to look at what did the care providers, so clinicians, hygienists, dentists, therapists, what did they actually think versus the patient? And again, it was just really about using the tool and not using the tool. And the perceptions were in general very, very positive. And interestingly, some of the attitudes of clinicians were a bit more, not sure if I need that. And I think that's definitely something we have to overcome, purely and simply because we are great at doing what we've always done and what we've always been trained to do. Change management is a massive aspect of dentistry in this day and age, and we just have to be very, very open to an ever-changing landscape. Without being too negative about things, we had a very recent pandemic, and I'm sure we all got slightly tired of all of the daily changes that were happening and how flexible and how adaptable we had to be as a profession. But this is the next stage, but it's a very, very positive one. And then the final one was really about being able to look at the prediction of caries, because caries in general, there's a massive level of understanding of it. But when it comes into practice, it's being able to make sure that this is accurately delivered. And this was being able to look at, what are the traditional techniques telling us and what did the AI tell us? And again, the machine learning model outperformed traditional techniques. So far we've got a pretty good company that's very accurate, brilliant FDA approvals, and there's some research sitting behind it as well. So that's all well and good, that's fantastic, but actually what happens? Well, we're all here for patients, at the risk of stating the obvious again. It's why we all get out of bed, it's our raison d'etre, it's why we all trained. And I think we have to remember, and any of you who know me will know, I don't stop banging on about this. It's all about patient care. I think in very, very simple terms, we are here for those patients. And what we want to be able to do is to get into a situation where when we actually have a discussion with a patient, what does the patient hear? Relief if you tell them nothing needs doing. If you tell them that their tooth needs filled or they need to have a more advanced procedure, this is what comes into their mind. They're pretty aware that they're going to be numb. They're pretty aware you're going to be drilling. They're pretty aware and hoping they're not going to be drowning as that happens. And I think the whole thing here is this is what your patients are saying. So through that, we know what our patients don't want. And I think that's regardless of how good a clinician you are, how painless your delivery is, dentistry is still a distress purchase. Nobody skips gleefully into the dental practice unless they've been awake for 2 or 3 nights, in which case they're probably quite delighted to see you. We actually conducted a survey in the US, and there was 1,000 patients in this survey, and it's only published this year. Now, some of you might sit there and say, oh, yes, it's the US. I've worked across the US and across multiple countries in Europe, and I accept there will be some variation. However, it will not be turning this number to 0. The fluctuation is likely to be much more gentle. It's not going to be massive peaks and troughs. So the good news, 48% of patients actually considered that their oral health was extremely important to them. And that's fantastic. That's great. It's good news because it means that they're going to keep coming along for care. However, 45% of them don't fully understand the diagnosis and therefore why they need treatment. 49% of those, again, were uncertain that actually things were necessary. So that's putting almost 1 in 2. 50% are not sure that you're telling them the truth. And that led to 63% in total being completely confused about the cost of their dental work. And that is actually a product of the first 2. Because if you don't understand and you don't see the need and you're not sure that it's absolutely necessary, because as we all know, dentistry only gets super painful when it's too late. And therefore, if the patient's not having any pain, and that can be periodontally related, it can be restoratively related. The simple thing is if they don't feel it, they may not see the value in it. And that's an important thing for us to consider. As I've already said, AI is surrounding us at the moment. We expect almost every aspect of it to be optimized. Social life, business life, work life, everything is optimized now by AI, and it's not going away. The more you do for your patients, it's actually going to separate the winners and losers. Patients will have the same expectations when they go to the dentist, because it's here in other areas of healthcare. They want their information in a really simple way. They want it to actually be unique to them. They don't want to be told a general sweeping statement. And they actually want clear answers. Consumerism came into dentistry around 2005. I'm old enough, unfortunately, to have graduated before the internet. And before the internet, patients were different. They didn't have the facility to go away and question something as they were exiting the practice. And therefore, the consumer aspect of what a patient does and how they behave is super important. And it means that we have to be on top of our game as a profession to make sure that that lands extremely well. 63%, just to reiterate, felt confused and uncertain about the cost of dental work. That's a massive issue. How do we deal with that? Well, we need to evolve. We have to meet the patient's new expectations as we go forward. So what does the future hold for AI in dentistry? And where are we in 2025? Well, sitting here today, this is still it. Still the X-ray, isn't it? The X-ray is still the status quo. The good old-fashioned shades of grey. There is. And actually what that leads to is that patients perhaps don't get the care that they need, all right? Because you have to try and get everybody on the same page. Now, before tools such as Overjet, that's become really difficult. Why? Because as dentists, the old joke is if you put 10 dentists in a room with 1 patient, you will get at least 12 treatment plans, if not more. And God knows they will all be right. And we'll all be very, very clear about it. But we will all have a very clinically led, subjective opinion to what that diagnosis and therefore what the treatment plan could or should be. So we lack that objectivity. Patients declined 50% of treatment that's recommended to them for all the reasons that I've already discussed. And it becomes a bit of a problem then, and you've got a massive disconnect. And then you involve third parties. Now, those third parties might be regulators, it might be insurers, it might be, dare I say, lawyers. So everyone has a different view, and again, it all becomes super subjective as to where things are. So what we really want to do is to make sure our patients get the care that they need, deserve, and actually deliver it in a very, very consistent way. This is where I'd love to have a live audience and ask the question, how many of you managed to run completely to time today? Because I know from bitter experience that they're great days when they happen, but they're also quite rare. And that can be because something doesn't quite go according to plan. It can be because the patient arrives with a medical history, the length of your arm, and you have to go through it. Or it quite simply could just be because the patient was late. But realistically, what happens, and it's very common in a dental practice, is that time pressure impacts your performance. And quite frighteningly, there was a study done about this in 2019. And these numbers are quite frightening. So when the dentists are under time pressure, 45% of carious lesions go undiagnosed, and 67% of perio goes undiagnosed as well, just because of time pressure. We're all human, and we can't help that. We're in a hurry. And it's very, very important to realize that and to look for ways to try and support and make life a little bit easier. Let's get into some case studies, because this is where it can get really, really interesting. What does this actually start to look like? So you can see on this image, what can you see? You know, we can see the crown on the upper 4. We can see the restorations in the 5, the 6, and the lower 6. Not a bad image, not too bad. But if you have a little look at that for a second, would you feel there was any need for treatment in there? Question mark. We just pop the AI through it. So you can now see the bone levels, which in the main are pretty good. They're all showing up as green. You can see the small calculus box at the distal of the upper 6. And I think most interestingly, you can actually see there's a suggestion of some caries at the distal of the lower 5. Now, if I take that back a step and actually ask you to look again, I was with an audience on Friday, and pretty much 95% of the clinicians in the audience said they wouldn't have seen it. So right away, there's a doubt that says 95% of people don't think there's anything there. I don't agree with the AI. Okay, let's open it up. And you can see quite clearly there that that is caries, and therefore utterly requires treatment, and therefore the patient ended up getting the right care. So if I step it right back, I make you 15, 20 minutes late, you have a little look at that bite wing. You don't have this, you missed this. And that's not a great place to be, because the good news is, because that patient was treated and because it was detected, they have a minimal restoration placed in a very conservative fashion. Okay, that's just one case study. Let's pick another one. So again, you can see this image, right-hand side bite wing this time. You can see very clearly the restorations and the 6s, but you can also see the interproximal caries on the 6, the 5, the 4, and on the lower teeth as well. Let's throw the annotations over. Okay, so the restorations show up in blue, the bone levels again showing up in green, and it's taken from the bony crest up to the enamel junction. But you can also see these areas of yellow and red, which are suggesting caries present in these teeth. The yellow tends to be more incipient caries. The red is definitely going through into the dentine junction. So same again, open it up. There's caries there. So the good news is the patient again gets a very simple conservative restoration in a very simple way, without the need for waiting till it's sensitive or waiting till they have pain, and actually waiting to remove more healthy tooth tissue. Because as we all know, the more tooth tissue we can protect and keep, the reality is the tooth will be there for that much longer. So really what we're trying to do is to introduce that objectivity with AI. And we were the first AI company that was cleared by the FDA to detect, outline, and quantify that oral disease, like tooth decay. It helps everyone to get the right care. If you just flick between these and think back to probably a patient this afternoon, knowing what you know now and seeing what you see, would you rather discuss that image with them, or would you rather discuss that with them? You can quite clearly see in this image, we've got some of the bone levels on green. We've also got red there where it's exceeding 3 mm. We've got the caries present. You can see the calculus boxes. Much easier to understand what that looks like if you're a patient from that aspect. So you're starting to get that precision from your disease, your restorations, and anything that's there on the film. Patients can see what you can see for the first time. Now, that may not be a good thing in some people's eyes, but ultimately, it's the patient's mouth, and therefore our job is not to hide anything, not to shield anything from them, but actually to tell them. And when they come for an examination, it's because they're here for an overview of the status of their oral health. What is my mouth like? And while they will all want to hear there's nothing needing doing, ultimately that's not our job unless it's absolutely the case. Our job is to be honest and open with our patients. So the patient can then see that. And if you were ever subject to scrutiny, and again, regulator, a lawyer, another clinician, ultimately you've got some objectivity there and be able to share in factual form with some consistency and with some standardization. Again, keeping going through the images, the image on the left, bit grainy, bit blurry, maybe not the best. All of a sudden, you can see very, very clearly on the right-hand side a lot more information that's going on. This patient, a 14-year-old patient, and we've all been there where the 14-year-olds know best. 14-year-olds are probably more like 21-year-olds in this day and age. But trying to explain to them about the dietary need and the dietary impact of perhaps energy drinks in this day and age, perhaps lack of oral hygiene. And imagine they've got mum and or dad with them as well. It's much easier to explain the picture on the right and be able to explain why they need all that work doing and what they need to do to try and prevent it moving forward. So this is really starting to add value just in your communication as to where things go. Important point to pick out is on bite wings, the bone measurements come up in millimeters. As I've discussed, it's up to 2 mm is green, 2 to 3 is amber, and beyond that is red. On the periapicals, it comes up as a percentage, and you'll notice on this image on the right-hand side, there are little dots at the tip of the roots, and that's because it's taking the apical point and taking a measurement then to allow us to say where the bone loss is in percentage terms. I mentioned we pick up periapical radiolucencies, and you can see in the image on the left there, this tooth obviously has a history of endodontic treatment, a history of a crown. It may well be that that area is a residual carryover from the original infection. But now you can quantify it because when Overjet measures the size of that, it is absolutely accurate. So it means that if you decided to see that today and you wanted to re-x-ray in 6 months' time, you would have an idea of progression. Was that area increasing in size? You still may not choose to treat it. The patient may not choose to go ahead with treatment, but you have more information than you have today. So moving forward, AI will be the new standard. And I think realistically, as we get on, I would hate to see any clinician in a situation where they had missed something and had the opportunity through the use of AI tools to perhaps have prevented the stress and the upset that that can bring, particularly if you end up in the hands of a patient complaint or whatever. So this is really a preventive measure as well. We've got thousands of clinicians using Overjet, and they're saving time, saving money, because it actually enhances your communication time with the patient and it allows you to be supporting that better care for patients. I don't think the image on the right, I don't think we're going to see the robots too soon, although I have seen a robot system in France where they are preparing crowns and veneers. So that is coming. So when it takes 0.3 mm at the neck of the tooth, it's 0.3 mm, not what we strive to achieve. And obviously there's the Yomi robot, and I've seen that used for implant placement as well. So these things are coming. I think the important thing to remember is we're not going to be replaced by the AI. The simple fact is the patient is three-dimensional. So when they arrive, they tend to arrive with their mouth attached to them. And also they arrive with the presence or absence of a medical history, oral hygiene regime, and also in mental health state and mental approach and attitude to oral care. And all of these things mean that any information you're getting from the AI is there to supplement the valuable training that you have had and also the skills and the experience that you have as a clinician to be able to take an overall account of what's there and deliver the very best messages and care suggestions for your patients. So Overjet, born and bred in the US, and for now has actually jumped across the Atlantic and landed in the UK. We've actually now got 5 clinics live just in the last month or so, which is a fantastic step forward for a business that had that aim. We have also partnered with SmileFast here in the UK, and that's the first QR code that you'll see, which allows you, if you can scan on that, to actually be able to book a demonstration. We're partnering with SmileFast, and together with the SmileFast team, we'll be able to talk to you about the opportunities to see the system, have it demonstrated to you, and ultimately, if you want to integrate it into your practice, then we would move forward from that way. So as I say, the QR code will come up again at the end, but Overjet very, very pleased and happy and excited to be partnering with SmileFast. But what does the UK platform actually start to look like? How does it happen? Well, first of all, we want to establish your imaging system and your software compatibility, because Overjet is web-based. Okay, so you can access it from anywhere. So if you decide you're bored with your Netflix and you want to access your images, or you just want to be considering something that perhaps you can do that from the comfort of your armchair. You will all have individual user logins, and you can access this because it is web-based. So first step, we establish whether everything that you've got is compatible with that. There are very few that we can't align with, and that number of systems we can interact with is actually increasing almost daily. So once that's done, we have an engineer remotely dial in to be able to access your IT system. Just to make sure that what we do is we pop this, we find where your files are all living, the images, and we attach a sort of watch file onto that, so that every 2D image that then goes into that file is actually scanned by Overjet sitting in the background. Now, once that's complete, we get all the onboard, or just the paperwork side of things. So we need all the details for users and everything that has to go through. And then we actually get the team training doing. Now, the important thing about this is team training. It's easy just to be trained as a clinician. I'm sure we're all guilty of going on courses and going back into practice, and we expect our teams to acquire the knowledge that we have through osmosis. And with something like this, it's really important that even your front of house teams can actually explain to the patients what this is about, so that they can actually help and enhance everything that is going on there. We all know that it wouldn't be the first time a patient had asked your dental assistant on the way back to the reception area, can you just clarify something about that treatment, or do I really think I need that doing? So I think there's quite a lot there to consider with where that goes. So having the whole team there to understand what this is and where it's at is super, super important. Now, the minute that team training is done, we won't go live. Why? Because you've just got to start using the system. Because once you start using the system, and I accept this is a disruption to the workflow, it changes what you're doing, but I'll try and offer a very simple solution as to how you would do that as well. But you want to go live. Now, we obviously will then be back in touch with you. How are you getting on? Picking up any feedback, any challenges that you've got. If I give you some recent examples. So we had one hygienist actually who came and said she would love to see a side-by-side comparison. So that is coming as part of our future release, so that you'll be able to line up bite wing from 6 months ago with the one from today. What does the bone level look like? What is the progression of that carious lesion? It was in the enamel the last time, we think. Where is it today? So I think that's one of the things we've already fed back. The next thing, and a very great story, was actually from Asif himself. We trained his team, and literally the first patient after the training session, so 2 o'clock patient needed to have 3 fillings, going through the usual explanation of the shades of grey. One of the fillings the patient accepted and could see, the other 2, patient was unconvinced. We turned on the annotations, and the whole mood and approach and understanding of the patient turned on a sixpence. And the reality is that patient then went ahead with those restorations just because they could understand. And I think that's really important. One of the other things that's really key as well is to make sure you're measuring the impact. It's easy to have what I call qualitative feedback. So how do you feel about something? I feel it's made my life easier. The assistants might feel that the patients love it. The receptionist might feel that the patients are coming out a bit happier. it's really important to put some hard and fast figures around that. Easy ones are, what's your patient satisfaction score? What's your patient conversion of treatment plans as well? You know, measure what it is today, introduce the software, and then measure and see what the impact is. And we've got a list of those suggested KPIs for anyone who moves forward with us. It's just really, really important. At the end of the day, there will be a cost to this. I'm sure many of you will want to know that. We'll cover that at the end. But the reality is you need to be able to know that this is getting back what you do. And I'll come on to that. So once you actually get into it, you now access your bite wing, and you can see that the images come up with the annotations on. Now you can see on this one that we've got a nice big restoration there in the occlusal of that 7. We've got some incipient caries in the enamel of the various teeth there, and also some pretty bone levels within normal limits. Being able to have that conversation with the patient is nice and simple because it allows you to enhance dietary needs, oral hygiene instruction, etc., etc. Now, when you actually log into the UK system, this is what you're going to be able to see. This is the patient list that you'll see on what we call our co-pilot product. And we have the patient ID, which is captured from your PMS. When was the X-ray taken? Patient name, date of birth, gender, and then the findings. And you can see on the right-hand side of this, you'll have the findings. There's some blue, which tends to be perio, and perhaps some third molars, and red tends to be more restoratively linked, so caries or marginal deficiencies, etc. And then to the right, you can see the view images, and you just hit on that and it will bring up those images. So you click on there and it brings up where you've got, and then to the right-hand side, it will start to list all of the images that are there. Now, that's a lot of information that's on this screen. So you can see we've got the red bone levels between the 5 and the 6 on the lower. We can see the amber at the mesial of the 5, the mesial of the 7. There's restorations in there, the enamels there, the pulps there. There's a lot of colour going on there. And that can be quite a lot of overload as to, whoa, so much going on from nothing. And therefore, what I tend to suggest is keep it simple, and I'm the stupid one. So anyone that's worked with me or around me will know that's been my motto for many, many years. So I would suggest, and again, happy to share this with anyone, bring up the image. It's probably going to have those annotations on it that I've just shown you. And the first thing to do is actually hit the space bar and it takes everything off. And the reason for that is it's really important that you start to diagnose that as you would do, and also start to have that communication with the patient as well. It also allows you to do the drum roll moment. We have this fantastic new software that's going to make it a little bit easier for you to see this. You can then bring on the anatomical landmarks and explain to the patient where the nerve is, where the pulp is, the enamel, the dentine, the bone levels, etc. Bring up the existing restorations, you know, that crown you have, you know, that filling we did last time. Here, it's all here. And then I would suggest once you've done that, you take that away again. Bring up the restorative. So where's the decay that you want to talk about? Bring up the bone levels. Where is that? And you can turn all of these on or off individually. You can turn all the perio off and all of the perio back on. And it's very, very customizable. But the reason why I suggest this is because the day you start using this, it's different to what you did before you had the training. This checklist is there only to get you moving. It's to get the train out of the station. I fully expect that realistically, beyond the first day or two, you'll probably come up with your own way to do it. But this is just a really simple way to get things moving, and it establishes a consistency of approach as well, so that you still don't miss anything. I say the restorations come up in blue. You can see there's some caries suggested under the mesial of that crown. There's some caries at the distal of that 6. You can now see everything's just starting to come up. Restorations, caries, calculus, bone measurements, and also DMF percentage as well. Now, for those of you, particularly if you've been trained and worked in the UK, you will know that DMF is usually in relation to child dental health. And the child dental health would be the number of decayed, missing and filled teeth in the mouth. This is slightly different. The DMF is a percentage, and it relates to a single tooth. And what this can actually do is actually really start to help when explaining to a patient the amount of the tooth tissue that is already filled or is missing through decay, and why the need for a large restoration, or maybe even an indirect restoration, be it an inlay, onlay, or a crown, might be necessary. So again, just really helping to where it goes. So you get to the point where you can view all these images, improve the patient understanding through education, and that does lead to increased uptake. Just as a reminder, bite wings, the bone levels come up in millimeters. On PAs, it comes up as a percentage, but it's still red, amber, green. So really, really useful in communicating. Wouldn't be the first time we'd seen people who come up with probing depth. And when you look at the X-ray with the AI, the bone level is nowhere near what is being suggested. So it's super important that your diagnostics there are actually taking account of all of the information that's available to you. So this can really be a great communication tool, a diagnostic tool, and ultimately deciding, does the patient have gingivitis or is it perio? Where is the bone loss? What have you got in relation to your probing depths? It's really important to take everything in that 3D format using all the skills that you already have. I mentioned DMF, so actually starting to point out here on that lower left 6, massive restoration, further decay in there, and the DMF percentage is at 55. Makes the communication with the patient much more simple when you're starting to talk now about these really large restorations or laboratory made or involved restorations as well. Radiolucencies we've discussed. So again, just to refresh, we're taking those data points, unstructured data, everything that's there, it goes through the machine learning and it comes out into those actionable insights. So it's really there to help support your detection and your move. And to give you a new level of clinical confidence, it can actually improve our ability to consistently detect oral disease. And I think it's that consistency. Some of you will be working in small practices, some of you might be working in fairly large clinics. And the reality is, again, 2 patients, how many, 1 patient, a number of dentists, how many treatment plans. One of the reasons why Overjet was born was that our CEO and co-founder Warda was moving house. So she went to a new dentist who told her she needed 6 restorations. She wasn't too happy with that and sought the opinion of a second dentist who happened to be the other co-founder, Dr. Chris Balaban. And Chris told her she needed 2 restorations. And Warda couldn't understand why there was this inconsistency. Had those 4 decayed areas miraculously healed? And from that, Overjet was born, and they've been very committed to trying to improve the detection and therefore the communication and make sure our motto, very, very simply, is we're here to improve oral health. Now, might not be the first thing you think about with this, but it can really also help you with quality. We all have to do audit. We all want to reduce our risk as much as we possibly can. And all of this quality management, how do we manage our audits, how do we risk manage our day-to-day approach in practice, can be enhanced by the use of AI as well. Why? Because we have an objective measure. And I think it's just minimizing that subjectivity and getting us to a point where we have a better focus on where things are. We will all say, and everyone will say, we're high quality, and I get it. Let's just prove it a little bit further, because improving confidence in the profession is really, really important. Okay, we're nudging through time here. It's really important to say, well, okay, I do all that, and what? Well, let me show you some numbers. And these are from the US, but typically we see case acceptance come up by about 25%. We see more money being possibly treated purely and simply because it sees a little bit more. And we see somewhere between 10 and 15 times the return on investment that you actually get. Just take some of these practices. Now, crown production may not be a metric that you want to see, but the simple fact is patients were going ahead with treatment. We look at another one where the hygiene impact, this is almost 30%, where patients went ahead with more involved hygiene treatment because they understood what was going on. This practice is really interesting. So before anything, they had a 34% case acceptance rate. So 2 out of 3 patients didn't go ahead with their treatment. They introduced AI and it jumps, more than doubles. Now, I don't need to tell you what that's going to do to your appointment books in terms of being busy, and therefore what it's actually going to do to your turnover as a practice as well. Dentistry has to be commercially sustainable. It doesn't mean that it's all about the money, not far from it. But ultimately, we have to be able to communicate with our patients in the right way. So in summary, AI is fueling these great results. Higher case acceptance, additional care opportunities, because it sees stuff that we just might have missed. Think back to those 2 case studies I showed you. And actually as well, it's a great way now to be able to target coaching and be able to benchmark. I've spent many years working with thousands and thousands of clinicians across many, many countries. Not everything goes right. And I would far rather be able to coach and educate a colleague and bring them back to where they need to be, keeping them safe. And I think having that prospective outlook for all of us is very, very healthy. Make education a priority. We're educated. We've been educated. We wouldn't have our degrees today without it. But the simple fact is, how do we pass that on? Patient education is key. And again, I'm sure you would all rather discuss this with the patient than previously what you've been doing today. That was just there to make sure people were still awake, obviously, because probably the volume jumped out at you a little bit. Okay, right. Amazon, Netflix, very, very customer-centric organizations. It always amazes me. You can order something tonight and it's here by tomorrow, maybe even before lunchtime. Your patients are going to become patient-centric as well, because as I've already said, patients will look to understand their oral health. They want personalized care, and they also want to understand because they're consumers. Everyone loves value for money. That doesn't mean cheap. It just means understanding exactly what's said. Now, we're still pretty early in this. Less than 10% of dentists in the US are actually using this, so there's still an opportunity. We're seeing the larger groups actually grab this and have amazing results with what's going on. And one of those businesses, North American Dental Group, I actually worked with in the past as well. So coming very, very soon will be the 3D capability. So I'm sure one of the questions will be, does it do CBCTs? The answer is not yet. We're just going through our FDA segmentation approvals now. So that is definitely coming. As a business, we're also running a project called Save One Life, because we're pretty confident that there will be some pathology that the AI picks up that the clinician who took or reported on the image of the CBCT missed. And we're pretty confident that will be, in many cases, can be oncology, and therefore will save one life at least. I'm sure it'll be many, many more. We're also moving to the point where we can actually apply AI to photographs. This is a hop, skip, and a jump then to what does it do with an oral scan image. You can see where this starts to join the dots and where the future will actually go. So that actually we're maximizing the opportunity, the guidance, the detection that we can actually have as clinicians. Moving forward, dental AI will be what your patients expect. That's quite simply it. Simple fact here is customer trust, loyalty, and confidence is absolutely key to what we do. I'm sure all your patients love you. They trust you. They're very loyal to you, and they're confident in you, but keeping patients, because it's just going to become a very interesting world. I'll leave you with two quotes. First one is from Henry Ford. It's a favorite one of mine. If I'd asked them what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. I'm sure no one rode home from work tonight. If there is, then I give up. But I suspect everyone didn't. And the simple fact is we're at that point where the world is changing dramatically in dentistry again. The rest of healthcare is steaming ahead. Let's not be left behind. And I think this is the one, while I said that dentists will not be able to be replaced, I think the simple fact is that as a dentist who learns to use AI is likely to outstrip and long live those who don't. It's a pretty straightforward one. That won't let me go there. Let's just see if that goes. No. I seem to be unable to continue on where we are. So there we go. Right, back to the end. So as I said, Overjet is proud and excited to be partnering with SmileFast. There we have their QR code. If you're interested in learning a little bit more, you'll be able to book demonstrations, discussions, etc., etc. At this point, I will say a huge thank you to everyone for attending. I hope you found it useful. I hope it's just prompted a little bit of thought and perhaps consideration, and be delighted to take any questions. And I'll pass over to Lou.
Thank you, Eddie. It was a great webinar. So yeah, we've got some questions in the Q&A. So I'll just get those up now. So the first question is, how long does it take to install into the practice? I think you kind of touched on that.
Okay, that's a great question. So realistically, once we've established that the imaging software and everything is okay, and the engineer dials in, the engineer visit typically takes about half an hour. I've actually sat and watched it happen. Not that I'm skilled enough to do it, but I've watched this happen. So that's typically about half an hour. And then it's about how quickly we get the onboarding information back and how quickly you can round up your team to be trained. Balance that with the availability of the trainers, and off we go. So I would say somewhere, if you standing start from today, 2 to 4 weeks. Don't see any reason for it being any longer than that.
Fantastic. Okay, another question here. How does the licensing work? Is it per dentist or per practice?
So the good news is it's per practice. So because I suspect there might be some dentists sitting here, maybe not probably not single-handed, but at least with a small number of dentists thinking, oh, that's going to be punishing if I have a large number of dentists as well. So no, we're very, very straightforward. It's per practice. So we have a flat fee rate, and the licensing it's on a 12-month rolling basis, and that's where we go. We work on 12-month contracts.
There's a question here from Miguel. Hi, Miguel.
Hey, Miguel.
Anything on OPGs?
So on OPGs at the moment, we're able to do level of eruption of 8. So it comes up a delightful, the more turquoise blue it is, the less eruption it is. I have also seen from our product team caries bone levels. I happen to know, Miguel, you have an orthodontic slant, and sometimes our orthodontic colleagues may not pay as much attention to bone levels and caries as they might as to the misalignment of teeth and the opportunity to straighten it out, which is probably the patient's presenting complaint anyway. So that side of things is coming, and then from there will come more normal anatomy around sinus floors, ID canals, etc., etc., etc.
Fantastic. As a practice owner, can we see all the x-rays done in the practice?
Yes.
Okay, peer-to-peer question. How does it compare to Pearl?
Okay, great question. And won't surprise you to learn I get asked this every time I present. Now, if I take a step back for a second, I've seen enough things over my career where there is always, we don't all work on the same DPMS. Why? We all have preferences. Is one DPMS better than the other? How long is a piece of string? I've worked on numerous different systems, both in the UK and across Europe into the US. They all have their ups and downs. I always answer this very, very simply, which is I look at it in two ways. We have extremely accurate FDA approvals, and I was attracted to the accuracy and the clinical focus that we have as Overjet. As I said, I'm one of 15 dentists in there. And then I also have spoken to a number of clinicians who have used another product, but no longer use that other product. And therefore, I was talking to one gentleman last week who actually has 2 other products in his practice, but he took the time out to have a conversation with me. I'll leave it to you there.
Okay. Question here. Is it compatible with VistaSoft?
Yes. So we have a list of all of these, and this is where someone will come back to me and play my webinar back to me and say, you said this. So I'm pretty confident it is compatible with VistaSoft. We have AI bridges for API bridges, sorry, for so many of these systems. But this is where the engineer scoping call just comes in. And as I say, on a daily basis, that number of systems that we can work with is improving. I've got conversations this week just to take things on to the next imaging system, the next imaging system. It's just got to be the way forward. The more that we can get this available to clinicians, the more clinicians get the support that it needs. So, but yes.
Okay, there's a question here from Suri asking, does the overlaid image automatically upload into your PMS such as CareStack and SOE, etc.?
Okay, right. So if Overjet is integrated into your DPMS, so you mentioned CareStack. With CareStack, we will be integrated into the DPMS. We anticipate the launch of that probably within the next 6 to 8 weeks. With other systems, we are not integrated with SOE. There are a number of systems we are integrated with, but other than that, it sits as you basically go in the morning, log out, have a bookmark on your computer, log into the system, minimize it. One of the things I would love to see, and I've asked our product team to do, is to be able to take the report and actually pop the report into the patient journal, because I think that will be a bigger lift to be able to make sure that the clinicians are picking up everything that's there. And while you may not treat everything, you can actually comment on it. So the integration will change and will develop as we go forward. But if we're actually fully integrated into the system, not only do you get the images in your system with the annotations, you can also then start to get reporting on that as well. But that's a whole new topic, and that will be for the future.
Jeanette has asked, is this limited to UK practices only?
So we are in the UK, we are in the US, we are in Canada, we are just launching in Australia. We're just undergoing the final stages of our approvals for the Republic of Ireland and therefore into the EU. From bitter experience, I know that while we have GDPR, MDR, etc. to get over, then we get into the individual nuances of each market who have particular controls around software topics that come in. So that will all be on development. But I was communicating with our head of security today, so we're in the very final stages and just anticipating those approvals dropping anytime soon.
Another one's just popped up here. Can the AI software be implemented by an associate dentist without impacting the practice owner?
Ooh, that's a great question. So there's a part A and a part B to my answer. Part A is I would love that to be the case. Part B is it probably means that you have to have access to the mapping folder where the images are stored, which means you're probably going to have to ask the principal to do it. I have to be honest with you, I have seen practices where associates have asked the principal and they've said, yep, no problem, install it. And they've just let them go off and do it of their own accord. So I think it's really about having a conversation with your principal. And then it's about whoever this is asking the question, together with me, talking some sense into your practice principal.
There's one here. My X-ray machine is a bit old and the imaging isn't always super crisp. Does this mean that Overjet won't work for me?
So we do have a minimum sort of pixel requirement and the quality. We're not a replacement. The polite version is rubbish in, rubbish out. There are much more sort of to the point versions of that statement. The simple thing is that we also have an auto enhance on our system as well, so we can enhance the images, we can spotlight in them, we can magnify them, and we do have a level of enhancement that's available. Some of those images I was showing today, you would notice are a bit cloudy and blurry, and then the annotation runs through them and it upgrades them. So it really does depend, and this is part of the engineering call. And to be fair, one of the easiest ways to do that is for us just to get one of your images way ahead of anything. You give it to me, I run it through our system. The system will quickly tell me whether it's good enough quality or not. It doesn't take a heartbeat.
Brilliant. Someone's asking, would you consider the use of AI for NHS dentistry?
So I think the reality is, in my experience, and the GDC demand this, that when a patient sits in front of us, we give the patient the information that is present in their mouth. Where this is actually coming from is, what do I do if the AI flags up the dozen fillings that need doing or need treated, and how do I cope with that within a single band of treatment? And how do I explain that away to the patient? This is not a new discussion. It's been there since the advent of the UDA contract almost 20 years ago. So I think the simple thing here is about, there's an efficiency here because it's easier to communicate with the patient and get them to understand. But as a clinician, I would urge you not to forget that phasing of treatment is an absolute must do, and actually using this AI to be able to say, look, here's the level of pathology that's in your mouth, be it perio, combined with an oral hygiene picture, combined with medical history, to actually be able to say, look, let's prioritize this, let's get you out of pain, let's stabilize everything that's there, get your diet and your oral hygiene under control, and then you phase and start to treat those things accordingly. not a new discussion. And I think there's an efficiency that hands there. But the simple fact is, if a patient comes to see you under the NHS or a patient comes to see you privately, what bit's he going to miss out when you tell them their diagnosis?
Yeah. And then I think most of the other questions now are all just involving is the price of it.
Okay. I think we can chuck that one at you, Lou, because you've got probably much more an eloquent way of describing that than me.
Okay, so let me get the exciting thing is for everyone who's on the webinar today, is gonna get a discount. So just let me just get my the right screen up. There we go.
You want me to stop sharing, Lou? That help?
No, you're okay.
I'm okay.
You can keep it on. It's fine. I'll just get this. It's because Asif's talking to me at the same time. He's really distracting me here in the background. Okay. So so the normal price per month will be 275 per month plus VAT. But what we're going to do as a launch price, so everyone who's a webinar attendee today will get 25% off for the first 3 months. So that means it's 206.25 plus VAT per month. So it was like you were saying though, isn't it, Eddie, that that's the cost per practice. So if you're a 5 surgery practice, then obviously all the computers get it. And also it's like the story of what we've said to, what Asif has said, they've had the training, they've used it straight away in the afternoon, and they've pretty much sold the treatment by explaining it better to the patient, and that cost has already, it's paid for itself really. So with regards to pricing, I know everyone's asking today and there's been lots of questions that are coming through. So obviously with the CPD, we'll send you out a feedback form, and on there obviously will be details of how to book in for a demo and all the information on the pricing and any other questions that you may have. I will try and answer them because obviously Eddie's been training me excellently, but anything not I will be passing it over to you if that's okay.
Of course, yeah. And just to hammer home that single point, Lou, um, this is another cost in practice. There's no point in kidding yourselves on about that, but it's not what you would expect. And I'm sure many of you are quite surprised as to what that actually is. And I regularly say to people, what's your charge for a medium composite restoration? And you'll all have a number in your head. And then you have to look on it and say, okay, at the cost that 275, without the discounts that Lou's just given to you, how many of those do I need to do? Now, the simple fact is, you turn it around and say, well, how many of those would I do as a result of, first of all, I didn't miss it because the AI picked it up, or secondly, that the patient may choose to go ahead with because they understand better. I was talking to a dentist in March, and we had this discussion. And I said, by the way, you also work in a 6 surgery clinic, so you're telling me that one filling every 2 weeks that's picked up extra, or the patient goes ahead with, across 6 surgeries. And he just went, yeah, okay. So he's been trained and he's installed. So it's a really, it's just a different way to look at it. And then there's all the other upside of you're more confident you're not missing stuff. Because if you're not missing stuff, you only wish you had a better idea when it's too late. And I think as we go forward, and unfortunately there are enough organizations out there who will take great delight in standing in front of a dentist saying, you didn't use the tools that are available to you. What's the reason for that? And there can only be 2 reasons. And the first one is, I'm such a good diagnostician that I didn't think I needed it, at which point the individual's probably going to say, well, clearly not, because we're here today. And the second answer can only be because I didn't want to invest in it. And I think as we go forward, it's going to be a struggle for dentists to actually be able to say, I couldn't afford it, in light of what this actually prevents. Think about what you pay for your indemnity. This would help you peace of mind.
Yeah, 100%. And I think as well is obviously I've spent many years in practice and stuff, and I think that from my roles of being like a TCO and things like that, it's just one of those extra tools that you've got. it's like when scanners came along, isn't it? You know, and you could scan everyone and get the image on and you know and help explain. Now with this, if I was in practice, I'd think it'd be brilliant to, you know, help explain things to patients and help them understand what we're trying to, you know, why we're trying to treat them and take away that, oh, you're just, you know, selling because you.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. You're trying to sell me something, and it's actually the opposite. And just to hammer that home, my whole point around getting the whole team there, Lou, you mentioned being as a TCO. I've also seen hygienists and therapists just get massive, massive benefit from this, to the point where, you know, they look back and think, well, what was I doing before? One of the interesting things when we do install this is that the images that you're taking before your training are actually visible as well. So the first thing that usually happens is the dentist dive off to see the x-rays that they've already been discussing with the patient to see where they are. So there's upside to this the minute you're trained.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'd just like to thank you again, Eddie. It's been a really informative webinar, and hopefully, you know, we've explained this wonderful system to all of our listeners. And like I say, we'll be sending out the feedback form to everyone. There's an opportunity on there to ask more questions. There'll be an opportunity to book in the demo and also about pricing and everything else. So yeah, I think on that we will say good evening to everyone. Thank you for spending your Tuesday evening with us, and the recording will be going out as well. So maybe if you're a practice owner or if you're an associate and you want to show it your practice owner, once the recording's out, you'll be able to share that with the rest of your practice. Yeah.
Great stuff. Thank you, Lou. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Eddie, and I'll speak to you
Yeah.
soon.
Bye bye.